Assalamualaikum everyone. Good morning. So inshallah, I want to introduce Dr. MUSTAFA TUNA briefly, and then he can start the presentation. Dr. MUSTAFA TUNA, he is from Duke University, and he has been working on Lucy and epistemological issue for a long time, and now he has two books is actually under the review for publication. And one of the book is that we want to actually offer a full semester course, inshallah, starting fall under existence and meaning program. So we got already. We had him make a promise that we offer it, inshallah. In that course, he's going to use this as a textbook. But today, he's going to share with you one of the topics in that book that is mainly related to an analogy, so analogical thinking. And essentially, he will present the concepts, the ideas, and explain how it is, in a way, within Islamic understanding, it can be, in a way, linked to essential references and resources. And then I also already told him that, here everyone is looking for the educational implication and application. So he's going to touch on this as well. And meanwhile, as he presents, if you have questions, for clarification, you can ask in any time, but if you have a question for discussion or comments overall, so we suggest you wait towards the end, so once he's done with his presentation, we can do that, okay? So with that, what is your question?
Okay. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. First, I would have liked to do the way Najat Hoja does and walk around. You're all educators, and I'm sure that's a big part of education. But I have some issue with my hip, so I have to sit. I apologize in advance for that. Second. This is the first time I'm going to do this presentation the way that I'm going to do it, and I don't know how long it will take. I'm not an educator. I did not plan as well as you would have. So feel free to stop me at any time if you need any clarification. I'll try to keep to time as much as I can and leave some time in the end for discussions. I might skip some of it if I feel that I have to go faster than I am going. The main question that I will try to address in this presentation is, you have been in this with Najat Hoja for a while. You already know what analogy is, and I will try to touch upon that too. I'll try to talk about that too. But the main question I'm going to try to address is, where does this method fit in the tradition, in the 1400 plus years of Islamic tradition? Does it ring any bells? Does it bring up any questions for people out there who might not be familiar with it? Like if you teach it in an Islamic school, for instance, will you your parents may come and say, like, where's the Quran in this? Where's, what is Islamic about this? And so on and so forth. And there are some issues that may come up. So I'm going to try to address those issues as much as I can, inshallah. Okay. So the main goal for all of us, or not all of us, like Muslims, is right. So God says that He created us to worship Him, and one of the really fundamental, really established interpretations of that is to know God, because you cannot worship something that you don't know. So you first need to know. The first obligation of any believer, once if somebody converted, for instance, the first obligation is to know God, to learn about God. It's not to pray, for instance. Say there is only very little time before the time for Asr prayer comes out. The person has to pray, but no, the first obligation is to know God, and then the prayer comes. So we have to know God, but the question is, what does knowing God mean? Some people out there may say, I don't doubt God's existence. God exists. Okay, so what? Like I know that God exists, right? So the question actually goes beyond that, because when we say to know God or knowledge of God, ma'rifatullah, in the tradition, what we mean is, as at some point Ibn Arabi wrote to Imam Razi, what we mean is to know God is not to know that God exists, right? We want to know God with His attributes. We want to know God in a way in which we can relate to God, in a way in which we can connect with God, right? So that's the goal. So when we say to know God, we are not only talking about knowing His existence. Nursi addresses this issue very succinctly and beautifully in a couple of places. This is going to be a translation from one of them. You can read on the screen too, but I will read with you. He says, monotheism is of two types. For instance, in the way that when the miscellaneous merchandise of a great person comes to a big marketplace or city, it is known in two ways that this is his merchandise. One is overall and naive. No one has the circumstances to possess such a tremendous amount of merchandise other than him, one says. But much theft can occur under the supervision of such a naive person. Many people can claim the pieces of that merchandise. The second type says, as though reading the label on each bale, recognizing the monogram on each roll, and knowing the cachet on each proclamation, everything belongs to that person. In that case, each thing has a meaning that points to that person. Just like that, monotheism is of two types. First, naive monotheism says, there is no partner to him, and this cosmos does not belong to anyone other than him. Heedlessness and even deviation, I translate that, dalala, can enter the thoughts of the possessor of this kind of monotheism. And second, true monotheism says, He is the one God, His is the dominion, His is the realm of being, His is everything. The possessor of this kind of monotheism sees God's stamp on each thing, reads His seal on each thing, and affirms Him with an affirmation based on witnessing His presence. Deviation and fanciful supposition cannot interfere in this monotheism. So, when we talk about 5D, when we talk about ma'na harfi, when we talk about knowledge and so forth, all of these things, ultimately the goal is to see God's signs everywhere and on everything. So if I were to try to open up this metaphor from Nursi a little bit, so imagine this, right? So you are living in ancient times, a caravan comes to the city and unloads a huge amount of merchandise. And one way to know that this belongs to a certain person is that nobody in the town has the capacity to own such merchandise, right? This is so and so, right? This is one way. Now imagine I'm a thief and there's a guard, guarding this pile of things, and I go to the person who is guarding and say, "Look, I agree with you. Like, this cannot belong to anyone but so and so." That's completely true. But this particular pen, right? This was actually mine. I was coming with them in the caravan and mixed up with the other property. And if I'm convincing, right? If I have all the necessary skills to convince this naive guard, I may be able to convince the guard and take the pen away, right? So what do we call this in the, like if you were to apply this to our concept of faith, what could we call this? Shirk, right? This would be shirk. This would be ascribing partner, because all of it belongs. Dominion belongs, and everything belongs to him, right? But I have the capacity, I have the skill to convince the guard that everything is his, but the pen is mine, right? Everything is his, but healing comes from the pill that you swallow, right? Everything is his, but you are satiated by the morsel of food that you ate, right? So shirk can come into the picture. So we want the second version, however, is so you might have these pens too, but on it says İstanbul İlim ve Kültür Vakfı. The name of the foundation is inscribed on the pen. Imagine that name, that logo is inscribed on each and everything in the entire pile, right? And I am able to, the guard is able to see that logo, that monogram on each and everything in the pile. So the thief comes and says, look, yes, I know this all belongs to so-and-so, but this pen, only this pen belongs to me. The guard pulls out the pen, looks around and says, no, it says İstanbul İlim ve Kültür Vakfı, it's not yours. Right? So this is the goal. We want to see the signs of creation everywhere, on everything, in analogy, or 5D, is the method through which we want to do this. Knowing God, and I mean this is going to be a bit repetition here, but knowing God entails more than knowing His existence. This is what, again, Ibn Arabi wrote Imam Razi at some point. We want to know Him with His names and attributes, right? Our concept of God is not this empty, hollow thing, wishy-washy, some kind of spiritual being out there who has nothing to do with us. No, that's not what we are trying to do here. Right? We want to know God with His names and attributes, and conducts or showing could be also there. We want to internalize that knowledge in a way that motivates our actions and states, because ultimately that's also the goal. Knowing God should lead to worshiping God. Worshiping God should lead to understanding His station and our station before Him, and taking a position accordingly before Him, acting and being in states accordingly. Now, in the tradition, our scholars, our knowers of God, saints, have all addressed this issue, right? And their efforts have coalesced in more or less two groups of activity, two disciplines. One is kalam, the other is tasawwuf. So we can think of kalam as, it's sometimes translated as theology too, but it has some problems, so I will stick to kalam here. And for tasawwuf, I'm going to stick to tasawwuf, I'm not going to use Sufism. Kalam, we can say the science of grounding knowledge of God, or about God, in rational argumentation. Now, the one problem that has arisen about this, and that the kalam scholars, experts have been challenged from outside the kalam discipline, is certainty knowledge, right? Certainty through rational knowledge is weak. It may not be internalized. You can memorize all the arguments, all the evidence, all the proofs, and you can regurgitate them. But unless you have internalized them, it's not going to, as Necat Hocam was saying yesterday, it's not going to be transformative, right? It's not going to lead you to a certain state in which you are pleasing to God. This is a problem. On the other hand, tasawwuf, again, is another discipline where these efforts to know God have coalesced, and we can think of it as a science and practice of cultivating a sense of presence before God, relating to the concept of ihsan, seeking excellence or striving for excellence in the famous hadith of Gabriel. And this has also worked, but then this has also been challenged inside and outside, because it's difficult, right? It's a long, arduous, perilous path that you have to follow in tasawwuf, and also in the modern age, the institutional settings in which the pursuit of excellence through tasawwuf has become less and less accessible. So both of them have these challenges. Both of them have been tremendously beneficial to the Ummah, to Muslims throughout our history, and they continue to be tremendously beneficial. But we seem to need something more or something extra here because of these problems that we are facing. So what do we want to have then? I formulated it here as to have accessible knowledge that is confirmed by or in experience and rooted in the Islamic tradition. It is Quranic, and we want a safe and sound, certainty-giving epistemological method that offers knowledge of God, connects us to Him, and renders existence meaningful without sacrificing the intellect. Now, let's open this up again. We want it to be safe and sound. Right? We are not after some kind of wishy-washy hippie, imaginary method. We want it to be safe and sound. We want it to be on the straight path. And we want that method to offer knowledge of God. We want that method to help us recognize God with his names and attributes and conducts. And we want that knowledge to be internalizable. I think I made up that word now. We want it to be internalizable so that it connects us to God. Right? Nursi defines faith, iman, as intisab, a connection. Faith is a connection, right? Yes, it is believing in something with your heart and articulating with your tongue, right? But that is the evidence or the proof that we look for to recognize a person as Muslim. But there is more than that going on, right? So faith, Nursi describes as connection. We want this knowledge to connect us to God. And how is it going to connect us to God? We live in an existence. We live in a world. And if this world becomes meaningful in a way that connects us to its creator, then we will find that opportunity to be connected to God. And again, we are looking for this epistemological method to do this. So, Nursi did not teach in a madrasa. I mean, he taught in a madrasa earlier in his life, but when he wrote the Rasail-i-Nur, the source of this 5D methodology, he was not teaching to students in a madrasa. He was teaching to peasants, small townspeople who would come to him and ask small questions. So he did not write a textbook. If you have a textbook, it starts with an introduction of the method, and then it moves on to examples and so on and so forth. We don't have that in a ready, nice to swallow pill form in the Rasail-i-Nur. But if we read carefully between the lines and we connect passages and so on and so forth, we can see that he has a methodology. So in one of the rare places where he talks about his methodology, he names it, or he refers to it as qiyas tamthili, which we have translated as analogical reasoning. There may be other ways to translate this, but this will do for now. And I'm going to read you a small passage from there where he talks about this. It is said in the science of logic that, and some of this may go over your heads. I had to spend a lot of time to be able to understand this, more than a year actually, like talking about it with people. I asked many people, everybody had a different idea. So I think I brought together all that wisdom and hopefully came up with something that makes sense. But some of this, as I read it, may go over your head, so that's okay. Don't worry too much. Okay? There will be some terminology here, and if you're not familiar with the terminology, you may not grasp it right away. It is said in the science of logic that analogical reasoning does not express certainty. However, there is a type of analogical reasoning that is much stronger than the certainty-giving demonstration of logic, and that yields more certainty than the first mood of the first figure of logic. Now, I put that AAA there. If you are familiar with logic, this will make sense to you. If not, it is basically a form of reasoning in logic, and it is considered in Aristotelian logic, it is considered the most powerful. Like there's nothing beyond that, form of inference. But what Nursi says here is that it's stronger than the certainty-giving demonstration of logic, and that yields more certainty than the first mood or the first figure of logic. So there's something. If you were a logician, this would sound a bit, maybe funny. It wouldn't make sense right away because AAA is the most powerful. Like, how can it be stronger than that? That type is this. It shows the tip of a universal reality by means of a particular representation and builds judgment on that reality. It shows the law governing that reality in a specific matter in order for that tremendous reality to be known and particular matters to be referred to it. For instance, with the analogy that while the sun is a single entity, it is present by all shine objects by means of luminosity. the law governing a reality is shown, which is that light or luminous things cannot be contained. Like imagine sun coming from the firmament. You see the sun in the firmament, and then it's reflecting on everything. You cannot contain it, right? It's going to reflect the entire surface. Now, what does this have to do with us trying to understand something metaphysical? Well, this lays out a cognitive pattern in our mind, right? Sun is luminous. Luminous things cannot be contained. It is something concrete that I can see, witness, and therefore grasp. I don't have an issue with understanding that because I am already seeing it. I am already sensing it, right? It is self-evident for me because I don't even need inference to understand what this is, right? So this is the easiest accessible knowledge that I need. I have access to it, and this lays out a cognitive pattern in my mind. And then using that cognitive pattern, I can move on to something else that's metaphysical, that may feel, sounds more sophisticated, more confusing, but because I have this cognitive pattern in my mind, I can apply that metaphysical, more sophisticated matter to this and understand it. Okay? Far and near become one, few and many become the same, space cannot apprehend it. Or, for instance, another example, the formation and fashioning of the fruits and leaves of a tree all at once in the same manner with ease, perfectly in a single center, and according to one law issuing from a command, is an analogy that shows the tip of a tremendous reality and universal law. It proves that reality and the law governing that reality in an utmostly, It proves that reality and the law governing that reality in an utmostly definitive way, which is that, like that tree, this huge cosmos is a locus of appearance, mazhar is the word, an arena of operation for the law governing that reality and for the secret of divine singularity, ahadiyya. Now, with this analogy, Nursi here is explaining the concept of ahadiyya. And I'm not going to go into details of what it is, right? So just all we need to take from here is that we have a concrete example, which is a pattern, cognitive pattern in our mind, and then we can take that cognitive pattern and apply it to something metaphysical, something that requires further intellectual capacity. Hence, the instances of analogical reasoning in all the words, that is the Rasail al-Nur, are of this type, and they are stronger and more certainty-giving than definitive logical demonstration. Now, as I said, Nursi was writing these to peasants, sometimes illiterate, uninitiated, small townspeople. There were some educated people among his interlocutors, but mostly uneducated, and they did not necessarily understand all the reference points here. But again, as I mentioned, there are several references to the science of logic, discussions in Kalam in this text. And Nursi is actually positioning himself somewhere in the tradition by doing this, and that's what I meant at the beginning when I said, okay, if somebody came and said, like, what is Islamic about this? This should give you some idea to, or some at least certainty about yourselves when you implement this method, that this fits somewhere and fits soundly in the tradition. It has very strong, very robust foundations in the tradition, and the tradition starts with the scripture, so the Quran and the Hadith and so on and so forth. So let's, yes.
So can we provide a little more clarification on that? So it should be clear. So the point here is to gain certainty in knowledge, right? So the logic provides certain reasoning of gaining certainty. And so obviously we're not logicians, we don't know how it's done.
They may become a little bit, by the end of this, they may have some, they may
So, but here we are referring to the qiyas and see.
Yes. So those two examples may be a bit too abstract. So I'll try to make it more concrete with this example. And the example actually comes from, I will refer to this later too, comes from the, I guess, a famous hadith in which after a battle, the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, were resting after the battle. And then they saw among the defeated people, the captives, a woman desperately searching around, running around, looking for something, and then they recognize like she's looking for her child, and then eventually she finds the child, and then she starts nursing the child, and the Prophet ﷺ has them with his mother throw her son, so apparently it was a boy, into hell, and they say no, you wouldn't, and then he says. He explains that the compassion or mercy that this mother has is only a tiny share of the mercy that God has for his creation, right? So you have analogy there. If you want evidence in hadith literature, right? That is a very good use of qiyas tamthili. That's a very good use of analogical reasoning, okay? So I see a mother responding to her child in need. This is something I'm observing. That's concrete. I don't need an explanation. I don't need reasoning. I don't need inference. I recognize compassion, a sense that I also have and therefore can recognize as the sense that motivates this mother to respond to her child's need. So I'm not just blank in front of this. I'm like this camera, for instance, has the ability to register and record a scene. The camera can register and record the mother searching for the child and then finding the child and nursing the child, right? But that's it. The camera will register and record these events, but then will not be able to attribute meaning to this. Whereas I, as a human being, can connect to this because I have that experience, right? I have something in me that recognizes what is going on in that woman, in that mother, right? And it doesn't really matter what we call this. In the language of the Arabs of the time, this was called rahma or shafaqa, right? So we can use mercy or compassion, right? But I don't need to go to the dictionary and, I have a dictionary here, that's why my hand goes to the cell phone. I don't need to go to the dictionary, open up what compassion is, come up with this definition, and then process the definition through my intellect, and then recognize and understand what mercy is. None of that is necessary, because I already have something in me that is analogous to what the mother has in her, and I am able to recognize this in the mother because I have it in me, right? And we call that compassion. I see that an invisible power is responding, connecting this to the larger reality, right? So now I know what compassion is. I have a cognitive pattern laid out in my mind or in my heart, like in my being. It doesn't matter where it is laid out, really. I have a cognitive pattern that's ready to use. And then I start to look around and I see that an invisible power is responding to the needs of all things in creation. The tree needs water, it rains. The baby needs milk, the mother has milk. The fish needs planktons. Planktons are growing in the water, and so on and so forth. You have better examples than I do with this. I recognize compassion behind this response and conclude that the owner of this responding power has compassion. Right now, I did two things. One, I skipped that here because I'm trying to save time, but one, there's a disproportionality in what is happening and what all these things that are involved in the happening seem to be capable of, right? Soil provides, I'm using this language, in quotation marks. Soil provides nutrition to the tree, but I look at the soil and the soil does not have the knowledge, power, will, understanding, recognition, and so on and so forth to provide anything to the tree. The soil is just like soil there, like it's inanimate. It doesn't have any capacity, right? So there's a disproportionality here, but it is happening, and it's happening everywhere. Because it's happening everywhere, I see that, okay, there is something beyond this. There's an invisible power, right? This is the first thing. That would take you to existence of God, right? But we said knowing God is more than knowing the existence of God. We want to know Him with attributes and names and so on and so forth. So what is it that's happening? Okay, compassion. Because there is need and there's a response to need. And then this invisible power has compassion. This invisible power, right? Whatever it is at this point, right? With revelation, with the prophets and so on and so forth, we will also get to know Him in a more personal way. But whatever it is at this point, that power has compassion. I recognizing compassion on me, again, I have that cognitive pattern, I have it in me. And on things I love, on every merchandise in the marketplace, if you will, going back to that earlier analogy, and I am filled with love and gratitude for Him. And so in a nutshell, this is what we are talking about when we say analogy. Is that clear? Like, did this make it more clear? Okay. We have a question. Because of the light, I cannot see you well, but I think I have a question there. Wa alaikum assalam.
So I'm trying to understand the division between logics and analogy, but I'm wondering if they can both be integrated. Is it possible to use logical arguments with analogies to further strengthen the argument? Is this something that MUSTAFA has mentioned?
Yes. Now, analogy is covered in logic, but in logic we have more than one method, right? And I will, inshallah, try to go over it. At some point in the history of Kalam, analogy dropped from sight and started to be considered a weak method. And it was replaced by what we call as deductive syllogism. I will try to explain this. And this happens around 13th century or so, Common Era in our tradition. So what Nursi does here is, he was a master of logic, by the way. Before he wrote the Rasail and Nur and so on and so forth, he has 2 books on logic in his earlier times. He could use it in a really masterful, virtuosic way. What he does is he combines analogy and deductive syllogism, and he articulates analogical reasoning in a deductive way. So what you are asking is exactly what happens, inshallah. And I will try to explain it, but I don't want to set up too high a bar here. Like it may not be possible to understand all the details of this in one session, right? So it's okay if you don't grasp the whole thing, but just take my word, he does that. Okay. So where does this fit in the tradition? Is this Islamic? The main big challenge that you are going to face when you try to do this is, and this is why the use of analogy kind of dropped out of sight in the tradition, is concerns about tashbih, right? Comparison. When I say, mother's compassion, God's compassion, am I saying that God is like the mother or God is like the woman, right? When I say tree is beautiful, God is beautiful, does that mean I'm implying, I'm insinuating that God is like tree? Right? When I say I see, God sees, am I insinuating in some way that God sees the way I see? Right? So this problem of tashbih, and it is a real problem. Like, I'm not taking it lightly. I'm not trying to mock it or anything. This is a true, valid, real problem, a good question, and it needs to be addressed. Okay. Now, as I said, what we are now calling analogy or methods similar to that were being used in the tradition. And according to Nursi, this was the methodology of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and it is the method of the Quran too, right? Imam Maturidi, one of the founders of the 2 Sunni Kalam schools, Maturidi and Ash'ariyya, and I'm going to give examples from Imam Ash'ari too, quotes these verses that I have on the screen, right? So the first one is from Surah Al-Baqarah. In the creation of the heavens and earth, in the alternation of night and day, in the ships that sail the seas with goods for people, in the water which God sends down from the sky to give life to the earth when it has been barren, scattering all kinds of creatures over it, in the changing of the winds and clouds that run their appointed courses between the sky and earth. There are signs in all these for those who use their minds. Use your mind. There are signs. Look around. Do it. We shall show them our signs in every region of the earth and in themselves, until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. Is it not enough that your Lord witnesses everything? On earth there are signs for those with sure faith, and in yourselves too do you not see? Do the disbelievers not see how rain clouds are formed, how the heavens are lifted, how the mountains are raised high, how the earth is spread out? So Imam Maturidi quotes these 4 verses, and there are obviously more than these, but he quotes these 4. And he says that it is okay to look at the external world, to observe the external world and infer from it knowledge about God. Now, we refer to this as the early Kalam tradition. So in the scholars or academics who examine the Kalam tradition refer to the times before Imam Ghazali and more so before Imam Razi as the early Kalam tradition, and the scholars after that as a later Kalam tradition. Right? So in the early Kalam tradition, the most prominent way of arguing for God's existence and for attributes, knowledge of God, it is called istidlal, okay, coming from the word dalil, which means indication. And istidlal is to establish connection between an indication, dalil, and it's what it indicates, madlul. And in a longer way, this was articulated as indication of the seen to the unseen. And there are various ways this is expressed in Arabic. Dalalat al-Shahid al-Ghaib is one of the most famous. Now there can be, or they came up with, and this is not the Kalam scholars, this is from earlier Greek Hellenistic logic, mostly Stoic logic, not Aristotelian, but Stoic logic. They identified 2 ways of indication. One is when the dalil and the madlul are of the same kind, right? So you see part of a body, and then you know the existence of a body. So you don't, for instance, you don't see all my body. You just see my upper torso, right? But you have an indication that I have a whole body because I'm functioning like a normal human being, right? You can see, my hand from here, and then you can know that there's a human being behind the desk, right? The second is when the 2 things, the dalil and the madlul, are not of the same kind. So you see fire, and you know you see smoke, and you know that there is fire. And this can also be reversed. You can see fire, and you can know that there is smoke, even if you don't see the smoke because of the brightness of the day or something like that. Okay, so this was the primary, most prominent way of inferring knowledge about not only God, but about things metaphysical, about things that are not seen. Right? That's why it is indication of the seen to the unseen. One example, for instance, in the Quran, God talks about hellfire. So what's hellfire? How do we know what hellfire is? Like, how do you know what it does? How do you know how it looks? How do you know? But it is something of the unseen, right? Yes, we have fire in this world, but how do we know that the fire that we know in this world is an indication of the fire that we don't see in the hereafter? Right? So it's not only about God; it's anything that's trying to indicate the unseen through the seen. Okay, I might be losing you a little bit, but if you have any questions, like you try to digest them. Yes. Alaykum assalam. Should I give the mic?
My question is about.
Okay, I'll try to repeat the question because the mic does not seem to be working. Yes.
Okay, my question is about we are teachers. When we collect teachers in schools, some of the most famous hadith that we talk about teachers is about Innama bu'ithu litamim makarimal, which means like
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I would like to get the questions. Right. Usually when we get teacher in schools, and I try to bring this to the context of teaching. And when we are some teachers, one of the famous hadiths that we learn together is about hadith Innama bu'ithu litamim makarimal akhlaq. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala sends Rasulullah SAW to perfect all human being akhlaq. My question is about define singularity.
Define what?
Define singularity. Is the concept of Khalifah is all the same with the divine singularity. As the concept of teacher is continuing the teaching of Prophet, which Prof Najati said in the first meeting, teaching is a prophetic word. Is this all the same, or do you have any kind of explanation of the?
Okay, let's address this at the end because I cannot connect it to the point here. If you can connect it to the point here, let me address it. But I cannot it doesn't. I couldn't fit it into the context of what I was just talking about. So if you can clarify that, I'm going to address it now, or I will leave it to the end.
No.
Okay, I will leave it to the end then. The question of similarity will come up here, so we will talk about that, inshallah. Okay. So as I said, Imam Maturidi and Imam Ash'ari, the founders of the two Sunni Kalam schools in the tradition, both use this istidlal method, but they qualify. They say because they might run into this problem of comparison, tashbih. So in order not to run into the problem of tashbih, they qualify the way they use it. Okay, so Imam Maturidi says that rational observation of the creation is a reliable source of knowledge. Seen signs indicate both similitude to and difference from the unseen, and indications of difference prevail. So it can be similar or different. You're talking about similarity, right? So what you see in the seen realm, alam shahada, can be similar or different from the unseen, and these are both indications. And then he continues on to say, if you know a quality, kayfiyya, or what is seen, and that quality is also reported about what is unseen. So you know basar, sight, and then you are reported in the Quran that God is al-basir, God has sight, right? Then you learn that the unseen is a similitude, method, right, of the seen, but not identical. But you don't understand, you don't conclude from that that it is identical, right? So your sight is similar, or is a similitude of, but not identical to God's sight, or God's sight is not identical with your sight. But you recognize that there is something there, there's a connection between the two. In fact, it is permissible for the seen to indicate a similitude only in this respect and meaning. For instance, from a substance or fire that you see, you obtain information of all substances and fires, even if they are not seen. Okay? So the fire example comes here. It's a famous example. It's used in everywhere. You see fire in this world, and you know that the hellfire is something similar to this. It may not be, or it probably is not, identical to it, but there is something similar between the two in what they do. Okay? And Imam Ash'ari also says rational observation of the creation is okay, you can use it, but he qualifies verification of a received and reliable report. So in both cases, we have this report coming up, right? That it is reported to you that God is al-Basir. You're not just making this up. But once it is reported to you, you have to make something out of it. So God is al-Basir. If my sight, or what I know as sight in this world, has nothing to do with God's sight, then how am I going to know God? Right? I'm going to be like the camera at the beginning. It can register and record. I can memorize al-Basir. Okay. But what is it? It doesn't add anything to me. It doesn't help me connect with my Lord. Right? So verification of a received and reliable report through the rational observation of the creation is both possible and necessary. And this applies to the knowledge of the unseen too. However, the target of analogy is not as that which is unseen, but as the meaning of that which is seen. So when Imam Ash'ari's position is, when I hear fire in the Quran, hellfire in the Quran, right? What I understand from this is not the very thing that is hellfire in the hereafter, but rather its meaning. What is the meaning? So then we try to come up with a meaning, and fire is that which burns. Okay? So hellfire is something that burns. How does it burn? Does it emit light? And we know from other hadith and so on and so forth that it doesn't, etc. But at this point, right, does it emit light? Is it hot or cold? Because cold can also burn. Is it big, small, etc., etc.? All these things that are irrelevant at this point. I don't have knowledge about that, and I don't claim knowledge about it. But what I claim is that it burns, because the meaning of fire here is that which burns, and God revealed the Quran in Arabic, in this language, using the meanings of this language. Or another example Imam Ash'ari uses, knower, alim, means he who possesses knowledge. When I hear that God is alim, right, I know that God possesses knowledge, right? This doesn't mean that God's knowledge is comparable to the knowledge that I have. It's infinite, right? It's comprehensive. It is not limited in any way by time, space, and so on and so forth, right? And I may not be even covering by saying all these things, I'm still not covering what it means, right? But there's a connection here. Knowledge, knower means he who possesses knowledge. And when I hear that God is alim, developing familiarity with Aristotelian logic in the tradition, this ceases to be as acceptable as it was in the earlier tradition. It is replaced by what we call qiyas, but don't confuse this with, let's put it this way, the term qiyas can mean many things, right? So when I say qiyas here on this slideshow, right, what I'm referring to, or what I will be referring to, is mostly what you see at the bottom here. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This is in English translated as syllogism. Right? Syllogism, logical syllogism. Syllogism and deductive syllogism especially starts to replace the istidlal method. Why does it do that? First of all, qiyas, before it came to mean syllogism, was used as a jurisprudential method, and it is still used. Okay, and you all know this. It's one of the four main, sources of jurisprudential knowledge, along with scripture, hadith, and ijma. Right, qiyas is one of them there, and it is analogy in its original sense. So I have grapevine in the Quran, and God says, khamr is forbidden, and then but God does not say in the Quran date wine is forbidden. So I have date wine in front of me. Am I going to drink it or not? Right? So I have a problem here. And how do I address this problem? I say, okay, what is this similar to? Okay, it is similar to grapevine. In what sense? In what sense? Well, grape wine is forbidden because it is intoxicating, because of its intoxicating property, and date wine is also intoxicating. There is the similarity between grape wine and date wine, and therefore date wine is forbidden too. So this aspect of similarity we call it illa, okay, and determining cause in the terminology of jurisprudence. The problem here is you will be told that it is inductive, meaning I did not see all grapevines. I did not taste all date wines. So say I tasted, I did not, alhamdulillah, I haven't, but say I tasted, 100 cups of date wine. How do I have certain knowledge that the 101st cup will also be intoxicated? Right? This is a problem. It's a problem that applies to modern science too, right? It's a presumption. It may be 99.9% that is going to be intoxicating, but there is that 0.000 something percent chance that it may not be, right? So there still is some level of presumption here. In jurisprudence, and this is what all fuqaha agree, that it's presumptive, and presumptive knowledge is okay to pass judgment. Okay. Now, in aqidah, in matters of knowing God and things about God, and in faith, in matters of faith, presumptive knowledge is not okay. You have to have certainty. Okay. Now, these scholars were not learning Aristotelian logic, and in Aristotelian logic, they came up with, they came across this method that suggests that it is offering 100% foolproof certainty, and that is this: all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? You start from a universal precept, proposition rather. All men are mortal, and Socrates is man, therefore Socrates is subsumed under all men. And if all men are mortal is true, and Socrates is man is true, therefore Socrates is mortal, the conclusion can not be not true, right? So in this kind of reasoning, we know that the conclusion is true, and also it cannot be untrue. Okay? We don't only know that it's true, but we also know that it cannot be untrue. It's 100% clear, period. Now, there are many problems with this too. I'm not going to go into that. But this claim of soundness, that's what we will call the 100% foolproof validity, we will call it soundness, right? So this claim of soundness started to bother scholars of the time, because with analogy, they were not getting such 100% and so on and so forth proof. So they started to worry about the possible presumptiveness of the istidlal method. And, you know, some of the Ash'ari scholars also had issues with the use of this method in jurisprudence. Long story made short, the istidlal method was challenged from outside by the Mu'tazilites. Qadi Abdul Jabbar is one of them. And from inside, that external challenge was internalized among the Sunni scholars too. And they started to suggest that perhaps when we talk about God, we need to have a more foolproof language. Okay, so Imam Haramain Ruknat al-Juwayni, this is Imam Ghazali's teacher, an Ash'ari scholar, ends up suggesting that finite created beings can simply not comprehend the reality of the infinite creator. The intellect cannot extend the knowledge it acquires from the observation of the sensory realm to the creator except through demonstration by contradiction, burhan al-khulf, meaning the deductive inference. So deductive inference is this: all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Meaning the deductive inference of what is impossible for the creator, which means negation, self. So you must have all learned about the Selbi attributes of God, right? Sifat al-Selbi, negative attributes of God. This is what then becomes solidified in the tradition. Now, I'm not saying this to disparage or say anything negative about all this scholars. They did a very good thing, because there were all sorts of other challenges coming to the tradition at the time. The Batinite tradition challenge, for instance, was important. It was on the previous slide. The Fatimids, who ruled today's Egypt and who were a Shiite dynasty, were promoting this Batinite faith. And Imam Ghazali lived at the time, and their claim was that you cannot have any knowledge in any way. All knowledge has to come through inspired, and it can only come through the Imam all the time. So whatever the Imam says, that's the truth, right? So forget about all logic. Just, put it on the shelf and close the cupboard. So Imam Ghazali comes up as a really powerful defendant of rational argumentation and the ways of knowing God, and thinks about the unseen through rationalization. And in order to do that, he promotes the qiyas method, the syllogistic method. He has several logic books, and most of them are about this. And then he has one last book, second to last, I think. He writes called Asasul Qiyas, the foundations of syllogism, right? So to repeat that, how that syllogism works, and he also teaches us how this can be used in jurisprudence. So his what was the name of it? MUSTAFA, yeah, thank you. His famous book, it may be here too. His famous book on the methodology of jurisprudence, MUSTAFA, he talks a lot about this, right? And he switches, in a sense, the way we do qiyas in jurisprudence, or he wants to switch. It doesn't become widespread, but he wants to switch the way we do qiyas, right? So remember the grapevine, date wine example, right? So this is how he formulates it. All intoxicants are prohibited. Now, how do we get to all intoxicants are prohibited? How do we know that all intoxicants are prohibited?
From the Quran.
And well, from the Quran, we know that khamr is prohibited, right? Grapevine is prohibited. There's also hadith about this, right? The Prophet ﷺ says all intoxicants are prohibited, right? So he starts from that hadith. He doesn't start from grapevine. All intoxicants are prohibited. Date wine is intoxicant. I added this all because it is implied in there. Then all date wine is prohibited. Now, this is why we call this AAA. Okay? In the Aristotelian syllogistic method, if a proposition is universal affirmative, we call A. So this is universal affirmative, this is universal affirmative, this is universal affirmative. This is called AAA, and it is considered the most powerful method of inference in Aristotelian logic. And Imam Ghazali suggests that we can formulate all jurisprudential qiyas in this way. Now, the question is, how do we come up with the first universal affirmative? Because originally, the qiyas method, it was based on an observation of grapevine. It was an inductive method. We were going from particulars to universal. Particular grapevine examples were being sampled, and from that we were learning about grapevine in general, in a universal sense. Right? Imam Ghazali says, no, we are not going to do that because of all this challenge that's coming to the istidlal method. Right? We are not going to do that. We are going to come up with, he comes up with another method called the tawqif, which can be translated as designation, and he comes up with various methods to do tawqif, to know that first universal, and convention is one of them. Report, like there's a report from the Prophet ﷺ in this case. And then this is interesting. He also says examination of the nature of a thing. Just put a mark on that, underline it in your minds. Examination of the nature of a thing. This is very similar to what we did with the grapevine, right? We sampled several grapevines. We all found out that they were all intoxicant. And then we said grapevine is intoxicant. We went from particulars to universal. But it is formulated in a different way, examination of the nature of a thing. So what he's saying is, we don't learn that each and every individual grapevine is intoxicant, but rather by sampling some, we understand the nature of this thing called grapevine. Okay, there's a subtle difference. Now, he suggests all of this in jurisprudence, and in Asasul Qiyas, he also suggests that this can be applied in rational matters, which would be matters of faith, aqidah, and so on and so forth. But then when he starts giving examples, he gives jurisprudential examples again. He does not expand on it in rational matters. Okay? The problem then becomes, can we use this in order to learn about God by observing the seen realm, right? And we don't find an answer to that in Imam Ghazali's work. Now, Imam Ghazali uses observation of the seen realm to learn about God. The 39th book of Ihya Ulumuddin تفكر في مخلوقات الله, right? The contemplation of God's creation, which he then expands a little bit and also writes as a separate treatise. تفكر في مخلوقات الله, the contemplation of God's creation. And he talks in great detail there about observing the universe, how you look at the sea, look at the fish, look at the tree, look at the sky, look at this, look at that, and then how you take lessons, how you learn, thank you, how you get lessons from this about your creator and so on. So he talks about this, he has a book on this, and he has other works too. And we see the same or similar writing, similar texts, again in the tradition, but we don't see them in the Kalam tradition. Right? Ihya is not a Kalam book. His separate treatise, Tafakkur fi Makhluqatillah, is not a Kalam book. We see that mostly in the Tasawwuf tradition. Or works that kind of transition from intellectual work into Tasawwuf literature. Now, what happens there is, because it's in Tasawwuf literature and Tasawwuf is experiential, you don't necessarily look for proofs in there. You just absorb it and let it work on your faculties. It does not provide proofs. It does not come with an intellectual support system, right? But this continues in the tradition, only in the Tasawwuf literature. In the Kalam literature, what happens is istidlal or dalalat al-shahid al-ghaib, or the indication of the seen to the unseen, is almost completely dropped from the picture. So when we look at the later Kalam works, such as Fakhruddin Razi's Al-Muhassal, or Taftazani's Sharh on the Aqidah of Nasafi, which were books that were used, that are still used actually, they are still used in the madrasas, that defined the Ummah, right? We don't see istidlal being used. What we see is the qiyas method being used in a limited sense in order to infer negative attributes about God, and also a very limited quantity of positive attributes based on a priori principles, a priori meaning things that we already know embedded in our intellect, right? But without necessarily going out and observing the universe. Now, what you cannot do with this is, for instance, you cannot talk about, in the Kalam tradition, using this method, you cannot talk about God being compassionate. You can talk about God being al-Basir, God being living, right? God existing, God being one. As I said, a very limited number of positive attributes based on our prior principles. But you cannot talk about God being compassionate. You cannot talk about God being beautiful. You cannot talk about God being majestic. You cannot talk about God being the provider, and so on and so forth. Now, you can talk about this, but not in the Kalam tradition, and not by providing sound, robust, well-articulated evidence supporting it. Okay. Now, again, this is not an accusation of the tradition. May God not let me do anything like that. God forbid, I'm not doing that. Right? Our scholars did their job, and this was sufficient and good enough at the time that it was used. Those madrasas taught imams. Imams spread out through the ummah into villages and neighborhoods and taught the ummah in their mosques, and they trusted their imams. They said, whatever the imam says is true, and they maintained their faith because their faith was not being challenged from external sources. Whereas we are living in a world where faith is being challenged, and challenged in a way, as Nursi says, that pretends to be coming from knowledge. And that pretense of knowledge is very much empirically based. And this was felt already in the mid to late 19th century among the Ummah, and many scholars in the Ummah started talking about what they called Kalam Jadid, a new Kalam. They felt that this was necessary because science claimed to be the source of knowledge. If you were to go to Ankara and see Ankara University, on its walls, a huge letters, a saying that is attributed to Nursi, not Nursi, sorry, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, is hayatta en hakiki mürşit ilimdir. The most truthful guide in life is science. And what is, when he says science, that he's referring to modern empirical science, right? So this is happening, and then our children are going to school and being bombarded with this empirical knowledge that seems to suggest all sorts of things, but teaching about God seems to, right? I'm not saying it does, but it seems to teach all sorts of things but God. And then our Kalam tradition is not offering us evidence that's empirically based. So it is there are two parallel things happening, and they are not intersecting, right? There are two turfs that are being defined. You go to the mosque, and the mosque imam says something, and you believe it, you take it. And then you go to the school, the teacher says something, and you take it too. And then it's up to you what you do with that, right? It becomes a matter of choice. Absolutely, you're absolutely free. Like pick one or the other. And if you pick this, you have, faith, you are spiritual. If you pick this, you are scientific, rational, whatnot. I have a question there.
Is this where it's going into the science?
I cannot hear you well. If you can give the mic.
So I was going to say, so is this where the epistemology is changed, like from Plato's theory of recollection to Aristotle talking about empirical evidence and observation to the Islamic epistemology where we are now, which stems from the Aristotelian epistemology, that we also have the empirical observation and the experiment and the rational thinking, but additionally is the primary source of the revealed knowledge of the Wahi, and how we can show now the revealed knowledge of the Wahi as empirical experimentation and observation, so that the faculty of knowledge and the yaqeen is manifested. So, yes?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we are trying to get to, right? From the very beginning of this slide. Okay, where was it? So we want accessible knowledge that's confirmed in experience and also Quranic. We want to combine all of these, right? That's what we want. And it was not felt as a need for several centuries. And that's why it did not, come out from the tradition. So again, I'm not criticizing the tradition because it was not felt as a need. But now it is a need. Now we need something that is grounded in the Quran, and that helps us to be able to look around and observe the universe and meet naturalistic, materialist, scientific, and so on, so whatever you call positivistic claims, right, on their own turf, which is the observation of the universe. And analogical reasoning, qiyas tamthili, which is very similar to and a bit improved over the earlier method of istidlal, dalalat al-shahid al-ghaib, does this. That's why it is, I believe it is so important. Now, what the 19th, 20th century scholars started to feel is this, what's written on the screen. Like the Quran repeatedly urges believers to reflect upon the creation as signs of the Creator, but while searching for methodological purity, right, like 100% deductive method and so on and so forth, Kalam scholars coerce themselves into a niche where all but few methods of inference by which to obtain knowledge of God are eliminated. Right? So we need to gain them again. Now, the way to gain them again is this is what Nursi came up with, and I don't know of another articulation of this in the modern era, is qiyas tamthili. And I'm going to read what we read before again now. Hopefully it will be more understandable. Right? It is said in the science of logic that analogical reasoning does not express certainty. Right? Certainty, not 100%. Right? However, there is a type of analogical reasoning that is much stronger than the certainty-giving demonstration of logic, and that yields more certainty than the first mode or the first figure of logic. That's AAA. Now you understand what AAA is, right? Nursi is saying Analogical reasoning is more powerful, stronger than AAA. It's also called Barbara, by the way. It's easier to say than AAA. That type is, it shows the tip of a universal reality by means of a particular representation and builds judgment on that reality. It shows the law governing that reality in a specific matter in order for that tremendous reality to be known and particular methods to be referred to it. I'm not going to read the examples here because I see that I need to speed up a little bit. Now, this is how Nursi seems to suggest that it works, and in order to process this, you also need to go to his earlier logical works. The main challenge to the istidlal method was that it was inductive, meaning it was taking particulars one by one, and from particulars it was referring to a universal knowledge. This grapevine is intoxicant, this grapevine is intoxicant, this grapevine is intoxicant, then grapevines are all intoxicant, right? And this, they suggested, involved presumption. You either have to do complete induction, meaning you have to look at each and every possible example of date wine, or there will be a possibility that that is not what you think it is, right? So this is not how induction was imagined by Aristotle, and this is not how Nursi seems to imagine induction. And you can see this in other examples in tradition. Ibn Taymiyyah, for instance, does the same thing. After the experience, don't take me wrong, I'm not suggesting that Nursi is Salafi or something. don't go there. He just does a similar thing. But this is a paraphrase of Aristotle's work. After the experience of a certain number of particular instances, the mind grasps a universal truth. Now here, pay attention to the word. The mind grasps a certain truth, right? It is not established mathematically that there is a certain truth out there. Rather, the mind grasps a certain truth. The mind has the ability to grasp a certain truth. I have in me something that recognizes what is going on in that mother who is searching for her baby. My mind or my heart or whatever it is that I call I, Ana, right, has the ability to grasp a certain truth, which then and afterwards is seen to be self-evident in relation to a species, i.e. grapevine, for instance. Hence, induction might not demonstrate the incontrovertible truth of a proposition, but through intuitive reasoning or insight, it affords self-evidently clear knowledge of a universal truth. Here, the point is not to prove on a piece of paper as if you are proving a mathematical equation that A is B. Rather, the point is to establish the truth that A is B in you. Internalization of that knowledge. You may subject me to the most powerful mathematical proof, but that proof may not be transformative for me because I just acknowledge it as truth, but I don't relate to it, right? So when Nursi says stronger, this is what is implied. It's transformative. It's in me. It is something that I grasp, I attach to, I internalize. Right? It doesn't need to be mathematical. Here the point is not 100%. It is still 100%, but if you understand induction in this way, because you are doing induction to the nature of a thing, right? Not to, you are not looking for complete induction and so on and so forth. But the point is, it is in me. I have a way to grasp it. Now, how does the mind grasp a universal truth or concept? This is again from Nursi. Like units of measurement or assumed lines in geometry, which have no external existence but are used as, this is my paraphrase of Nursi rather, are used as frames of reference to comprehend and describe the world, the I, whatever it is that I have, myself, my ana, my soul, my spirit, my fitra, my conscience, wisdom, right? My heart. The I is a mental construct emerging from the assumed totality of all human senses and faculties. However, the assumption of this construct provides reference points to make sense of the cosmos and the divine message it transmits, like a map or index of reality. Through the eye's binoculars, one sees what the cosmos is and what function it fulfills, and once information from the outside world reaches the self, one sees an affirmer in the eye. It is stronger because we have an affirmer in us, right? We are not just intellectually confirming, but we have an internal affirmer about this. And the point here is to find those affirmers and to connect what we are observing in the external world to those affirmers inside. And if we can do this for our children, mashallah, it's going to be a big step. The affirmer in the eye confirms universal truths, which point to signs of creation in the cosmos. So again, the question is there tashbih in this? We need to address that too. I have sight, God has sight. I hear, God hears. Tree has beauty, God has beauty. Mothers have mercy, God has mercy. The firmament has majesty, God has majesty. So is there tashbih in this? My answer is no. Why? Remember, we said we have two ways of istidlal. One is of the same kind, the other is not of the same kind. If we go with of the same kind, right? The way to think of this, again, this requires a much finer logical discussion. I'm not going to go in there, or I will try not to go in there. It might require an hour of discussion. But what we are doing there is we are not combining what you observe in this universe, in the seen, and God or the unseen in a closed category. So what I mean by category is there's these concepts called genus and species in logic, right? So think of this. Human being is a thing. This is probably the largest existent thing, this is the largest category, right? Human being is a living thing. This is another category. Human being is a rational thing. It's another category. Human being is a rational animal, right? All animal being, living being here. Okay. So when I combine human being with thing, the highest, broadest category, right? I am not implying an ontological similarity between the human being and the other thing. Say, human being is a thing, the cup is a thing. Am I implying an ontological similarity between the human being and the cup? No. So when we do istidlal in this method, we use the highest, broadest category or the genus, the far genus in this method, in the istidlal method. Therefore, we are not implying similarity. But another way to think about this is, what we are saying is, and this goes to the Akbar Ibn Arabi's Asma theory, which Nursi articulates used in a masterful way, to think that everything we see, observe, and everything that exists in the created realm are manifestations of divine names and attributes. They are mirror images, or they are like mirror images. The way an image in the mirror is not me, but similar to me, right? You look at the mirror image, or you look at the full photograph, and you say, this is Mustafa, right? But what you mean is not that the photograph is Mustafa, like you would not enter into a property transaction with that photograph, for instance. If somebody suggested that you did, you would, look at me, are you crazy? What are you talking about? Right? So it's a similitude, but not identical. It's a similitude that provides a point of connection, provides a point of reference in me to that, but it does not imply identity, identicality. If they are not of the same kind, then we have less problem there, because as Imam Maturidi, I think, had said that istidlal can be in two ways. Either it's similarity or dissimilarity. Here we are talking about dissimilarity already. So we don't have a problem with this anyway. My createdness indicates that there's a creator, and God is the creator. My neediness indicates that there is a provider, and God is the provider. So we don't have a problem here. Okay, this is about that. Anyway, let's skip this. So, all of this put together, I'm going to try to walk you through a step-by-step process of inference that we use in analogical reasoning. And then we are going to come back to a concrete example, and inshallah, I'm going to try to end somewhere around there. The entity of the original case of the analogy, that is what we see in the scene realm, is a part or whole of or the whole of the scene realm, the cosmos. So it is either a part of the cosmos or the cosmos itself. So I'm either looking at the pen as a part of the cosmos, or I'm looking at the cosmos. But that's where I'm starting. This is empirical. The target case of the analogy are divine names, attributes, and conducts, although the argument can be extended from there to other aspects of the realm of the unseen, for instance, like paradise, hellfire, angels, Satan, resurrection, hereafter, and so on and so forth. But mainly what we are trying to do here is we are trying to learn about God, and therefore our target are divine names, attributes, and conducts. The original case and the target case meet in the furthest possible genus category of existence. What is subject to analogy is the manifestation of divine names, attributes, and conducts, not God's entity. The indications of divine manifestation also indicate the existence of God's entity, but not his quiddity, i.e., we are not talking about, and we don't have the ability to comprehend what God actually is. Right? That's beyond our comprehension because we are of two different kinds. The microbe living on my tooth cannot comprehend what I am because all it has access to is a tiny part of my tooth. Right? Okay, I skipped that, so I'm not going to talk about it. Let me read this and then I'll try to explain. The special accident deficient description corresponds to the aspect of similarity in analogical reasoning as a universal meaning that is accidentally attached to the entity of the original case, like a mirror image. Basically, when I talk about this aspect of similarity, compassion, right? I have compassion, God has compassion. I'm talking about a reflection of the real thing on me. I'm not talking about the real thing. And the way that the mirror image is not the same as me, the way that you would not enter into a property transaction with my photograph, right? The compassion that I'm talking about here is not an indication of the scope and quiddity of God's compassion, but it's its reflection manifestation. It is a reference point for me to connect to God. The special accident and the entity of the original case together constitute the original case as a part. Okay, I'm going to skip this because it requires more discussion that I skipped already. So what we are trying to say, then I'm going to try to summarize that. Here is, we use the image on the mirror in order to recognize the source of the image. It tells us two things. One, that the original exists. Two, what I see in the mirror, what I see on the mirror is a reference point for me to be able to connect with him. Okay? We are not making claims beyond this. It is a mirror image. It is not a measure to measure the magnitude and quiddity of God. So there is no tashbih. So this is, again, the example that I gave at the beginning. The Prophet ﷺ was talking with his companions. They saw the woman and she nursed, and he said that God is more merciful to his slaves than this woman is to her child. Okay, so let's try to see some of the process of analogical reasoning in this. The Prophet ﷺ points to the example of a merciful mother, and his companions understand the universal meaning of mercy or compassion in that particular case. He does not, pull down to the side and say, look, I'm going to explain to you what mercy is. He's not doing that. Because it's not possible. Unless you have a reference point in you. Right? Unless it is already embedded, hardwired in you. Like there are people who are sociopaths, right? Who cannot have certain emotions. It does not make sense to them. Or, if you think of a blind person, you cannot explain how orange is different from green to a blind person, right? They already have this, and seeing it in the seen realm triggers what they already have, brings it out. So because this is the case, we don't need to worry about, in you doing analogy here, defining mercy. We will just call M. Okay? It is what you already know. What is observed in his mother is M. Since the entity of this mother cannot be the source of M, this particular occurrence of M is an accidental manifestation, i.e. it is a mirror image. It is reflecting on this mother. That's what accidental manifestation means. It is a reflecting similitude of the universal meaning of M that manifests from the source to which M belongs entitatively, that's God. The entities of all things in the cosmos are like this mother in their incapacity to be the source of M, and therefore all M occurring in the cosmos are reflecting similitudes of the universal meaning of M that manifests from that original source. That original source to which M belongs entitatively is God, manifesting with his divine name, merciful. Okay? This is it. Now, I have 15 minutes. I have a piece that I want to read from Bediüzzaman's Risale-i Nur, in which he fleshes out in which ways we can use this method, in which ways we can find those reference points in us in order to relate what we see in the seen realm to the unseen. Okay, but we can either do this, or I can open up the form and we can ask questions too, and then I can, in sense, you can read it. So if you have questions, because I know that I skipped a couple of points and they require a longer discussion, and I may have missed you. So if you have questions, please ask that now, or I'm going to read this. I think there's a question there, yeah. It's still not working.
Could you please go back to the other slide?
This?
So the layout of these arguments, does it reflect again that Barbara, or what's it called?
Barbara, yeah.
Yes. Does it reflect that kind of structure?
It is. Okay. It is reflected. Do you want me to try to explain?
That I understand, but I'm trying to also wonder, I'm trying to understand with early Kalam, might it be that they focus on, the privative attributes and the negative, positive, and not so much on the compassion on the other attributes? Because do they think that understanding the privative, positive attributes were a first step that was necessary to then understand the rest of the attributes?
Yes, of course. They would assume that once you understood this, you understand, you recognize that there is God and there are prophets, and God sends his message in revelation through prophets, and whatever is in the revelation is true, that you don't need further proof to agree to assent to affirm what is in the revelation. And therefore, if God says, I am compassionate, God is compassionate. So you don't have a problem with that, right? The question arises when all of these are challenged, and then we need to internalize. We need to find ways of internalizing this, going beyond agreeing to the authority of what is claimed to be authoritative, right? So yes, they did not ignore this completely, but they did not take the extra step of helping us find ways of internalizing this through observation, through experience, carrying that knowledge to an experiential level. The way to carry that to an experiential level was in tasawwuf, right? Through abstention and rigorous worship and so on and so forth, you will be inspired with that knowledge, right? Then the problem becomes avoidance of sins. And so the problem becomes, how do we do that in this modern age, right? Some people can do it, and they do it, and that's beautiful, but it's very difficult. Sin is everywhere. Demands of modern life are too rigorous, too exacting. So we need further ways of dealing with the question.
So if I understood correctly,
That works.
If I understood correctly, the main focus here is on establishing a solid understanding of who the Creator is from an Islamic perspective. But alongside that, I'm wondering if at the same time we can also talk about whom Allah cherishes, whom starts in it. Because we obviously must start from the point of understanding that there is the Creator who has of course created Prophet. But without going to the next step, then we risk leaving out conversations about Allah being the most compassionate and Allah being the most merciful. So I'm wondering how perhaps.
Yes. Now, Nursi uses this method to carry the discussion to other aspects of faith. In the Kalam tradition, you would have a discussion of Tawheed, right, Uluhiyyah, and you would have a discussion on Nubuwwah, and then you would have some discussion of Akhirah, and all other issues would be, covered in a few pages at the end of the book, and you wouldn't go into much detail. Nursi uses this method to discuss Nubuwwah in great detail, but he also uses it to discuss resurrection and Akhirah in great detail, the existence and necessity and functions of angels in great detail, the existence of the spirit Ruh in great detail, the necessity of bodily resurrection and paradise in great detail. So he shows us in implementation that this can be carried beyond knowledge of God. But that's the starting point, and that's the most important point for us.
Thank you very much, Hocam. A lot of interesting points that kind of provided more clarification to what we have been covering in the 5T model. So two questions I want to really ask. One is, obviously starts with the presentation making the case that we all want to have certainty. We want to know Allah, we want to be sure about our knowledge. And then you mentioned that, in the past verse, given the Quranic verses, that we have established scholars, they did use this istidlal. So in a way that later on, they basically switched to the syllogism. So, and essentially, it seems like that's the impact of Greek philosophy somehow, Aristotelian idea affecting them. And but then you made it very clear that you can, the istidlal with the qiyas tamsili give you even higher certainty. So, but for many generations, they were not using that. They were only using, as you mentioned, qiyas in fiqh, that to solve some issues. So question number one, how did they manage to reach a certainty and internalize as a believer, given that we know in the Quran that Imam alayhi salam says, I know, but I want to reach yaqeen. So the yaqeen that if we again take it as a certainty, how can you internalize, reach a certainty? That's number one. Number two is you made the case that we particularly need this methodology in modern time against scientific empirical argumentation. So I want you to elaborate on that one. How will you be able to sell this idea when they come to you and say, evidence all empirical, if something's not observable and universally testable, that I can accept this as a scientific event. So how would you go and use this, as a kind of universal knowledge with certainty that in a way that you would say it's actually better than your empirical evidence?
So how did they come up with certainty in the past? Two ways. One is trust in the authority of those who are in positions of authority. Right? You are born in a village. Your mother tells you God exists. Your father tells you God exists. and you start going to the mosque, and your imam and teacher tells you God exists, and you marry, your wife comes with the knowledge of God exists, and everybody says God exists, like it never appears to you that God may not possibly exist, right? So it is a more protected world, or it was a more protected world in which people lived, right? Therefore, you trusted the authority and you preserved faith. And when it was, never challenged, perhaps it was even stronger than what we have today, because, there's this famous story that's narrated about Imam Razi, although I'm not sure if that is Imam Razi was the protagonist of the story or not, but he was walking by somewhere, and then everybody was, going to him and showing respect and so on and so forth. This old woman sees this and is like, who is this? And they say, don't you know he's Imam Razi, he has 70 proofs for God's existence. And she says, if he did not have 70 doubts about God's existence, he would not need 70 proofs. And when Imam Razi hears this, he says, on to you is the faith of the old woman. Right? And then it's also narrated as a hadith in Ihya and so on and so forth. But anyway, you get the idea, right? So on to you is the faith of the old woman, but the old woman lived in that village. Her faith was never challenged. She was never faced with doubts. And now you go to YouTube, and all of a sudden, you click 3 things, and the algorithm puts you in a discussion between, what was the Dawkins, something Dawkins, and whatever, no need to mention the names. And you're a 15-year-old young man or young woman, and you watch this, and all of a sudden your world is upside down. You're tumbling down the hill, right? So the authority was working at that time. It's not working. Second was tasawwuf, right? People would subject themselves to rigorous regimes of self-discipline, and as a result of which we are told, and we are told with millions of people, and therefore there's enough reason to believe this, that they were inspired with this knowledge. Okay? And then they were also provided the basics of this through the kalam methods, like the qiyas and so on and so forth. So it's not nothing. The negative proofs, that they are proofs, right? Or other proofs of kalam, like the cosmological argument and so on and so forth. And I see that Ismail Hojam is there, so I'm embarrassed to talk about this now, but he is the expert on that. They are proofs, right? But they are not going to get us to the depth and breadth that we are aiming here in terms of being able to talk about and relate to God with the broad spectrum that we are talking about here. But they did have it. They were believers. The Prophet ﷺ has said, or is narrated to have said, that each generation coming after the previous is going to be worse in the ummah. Therefore, mashallah, they were better than us. That we are not talking about, we're not claiming superiority over them. They did have it, but what they had is not working now. Our authority structures have collapsed and demolished. Authority, the concept of authority is destroyed today. And the demands and pressures and bombardment of the materiality of the world is such that it's almost impossible to go through the wayfaring, the slough that they were going in. And so we need more, right? And Meduzaman says somewhere, I did not take it as a quote here, but he says that it is out of divine mercy that God has bestowed to the fast-moving people of this age a quick, sound, easy method in this, and qiyas, in what he articulates in the Risales. Right? So the second question, what happens with science, or how is that authority claimed? Now, can you raise your voice?
Just what you said right now, you said there are 2 ways you believe God, either through authority or the soul. So what about the Quran? What is your like the Quran and understand how it connects to this creation, and we look at that? Was it not individuals becoming convinced because of the universal?
No, of course, it is there. People can read individually the Quran, and they are exposed to this method in the Quran. And Nursi says that he found this method in the Quran. He's extrapolating this method from the Quran. But it is not emphasized. It is not translated into the educational method so on and so forth, except in the Tasawwuf literature. Remember, I mentioned that too, right? It is mentioned in the Tasawwuf literature. You can see examples of this, but it's not going to be provided with proofs, so intellectual proofs. You are expected to just absorb it and internalize it through your heart, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. As I said, this was there in the early Kalam tradition. Obviously, Imam Shafi'i and Imam Hanbal are not the Kalam scholars, but they precede the emergence of the Kalam tradition. It is there. We see them using this, right? But what happens is, or what I described as this method falling out of the picture, happens way after Imam Shafi'i or Imam Hanbal, right? In the 12th, 13th centuries or so. So it was there, it dropped out of the picture, and we are trying to resuscitate it. So the second question about science and how did science emerge as an authority? Was it? Am I remembering the question right?
How, when science go based on empirical evidence, how would you use this intuitive evidence as some things against and challenge that? Because you offer this as a way of the need emerge because of the empirical evidence in science and questioning that. Can you elaborate how can we use this when you're challenged by the empirical evidence in science?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's something that I think I'm still thinking about, and I think we need to think about together, because there is a problem. We said our authority structures were demolished, collapsed, are not working the way they used to work any longer, but that does not mean that there is no authority. I mean, individuals as authorities is gone. Like, we don't recognize that anymore because there's so much individuality and so much aggrandizement of the self and so on and so forth. We cannot recognize other individuals as authorities any longer. But there still is an authority that has pervaded entire discourses and institutions and structures of modern life, and that is the authority of, in a sense, science. And that takes us to at least the 19th century, in which European powers colonized the world. And it looked like they had found it, they had figured it out, and we were left behind. And unless we catched up with them, we were going to be destroyed, right? So they were coming to the rest of the world, and within Europe, they were coming to Europeans who were not on board yet, with such power that power became a justification for their arguments. And this goes to Bacon's operative science. Like, he says that the measure for the truth of something is that it works. And they borrowed it, they took it, right? They have cannons that shoot 7 miles, and we have cannons that shoot 1 mile, and theirs work, ours doesn't. So this put people in a really serious, tragic crisis, right? If we are right and they are wrong, why are they always victorious? What's going on here? And that continues today, right? So the American, European, whatever, Korean pop singer does things that you would not imagine doing in your life, because you would be embarrassed before your Lord. But then this person earns billions of dollars and lives in a mansion that's up on the hill, and you are struggling here. So what do? You're a 15-year-old boy who is trying to imagine what he's going to do in the rest of his life, how is he going to make a living, and so on and so on. What do you do? Right? Why not put that ring on your ear, and perhaps that may be God, but perhaps the God doesn't demand me not to smoke or not to drink alcohol, and so on and so forth. So these are problems that are very difficult to boil down to a few words and formulate, right? These are problems that are happening real time in world, and because they're happening real time in the world and they are being experienced by individuals in individual ways, we really need to come up with solutions that are going to be pervasive and that are going to be strong enough, and importantly, that are going to have an affirmer, right? Remember that affirmer that we talked about? That are going to have an affirmer in the hearts and minds of the individuals who are going through these troubles on a day-to-day basis in their cocoons, right? And that's why the experiential side of this method is so important. That's why the tasawwuf experience was so important, because once you like see things, that you see things, you experience it. But in the not absence, but paucity of the functionality of that, we need methods that are more broadly accessible to individuals and that are going to have affirmers in their own annas, in their own entities. I went on too long about this, but basically, science or the scientific establishment or powers that may be who used science in order to dominate the world claimed an authority for science because it worked, right? This in and of itself is not going to pass the validity judgment of any rational, logical argumentation, right? That it works is not a measure. That works, all it means that it worked, right? It doesn't mean that it can have a claim to universal truth, right? But because it works, it addresses the lower soul, which demands power, which worries about not having that power, and so on and so forth. And therefore, its claim to authority was very powerful and is still very, very powerful, right? And all I can think of is that we have to face it with methods that are experiential, that can be carried beyond mere intellectual argumentation. And the beauty of analogical reasoning is that it is based on experience. It is based on observation. It's based on the things that we see with our eyes. But we need to lay out those cognitive patterns and the skills to translate experience into an understanding of higher reality.
Questions?
I think we're over time, by the way.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. I think it was very enlightening, alhamdulillah. What I think is, if I have to summarize all of what he said in one word, or one sentence, it seems like he's saying we need to be aware of the third eye that we all have. We think we have two eyes, but there's a third eye. What is that third eye? There's the eye in the self, the ana part. So essentially, that is the eye which we can see and reach certainty. And I think that analogy comes with this fact that once we use this eye and we see with this third eye, then we can reach certainty and even be more sure than what the other two eyes question or challenge to us. Thank you very much. And again, I strongly recommend that you read more. I know that the time was short. It just presented part of his work. So he has a whole book, and I think he covered this subject in 3 chapters of this book that is coming now. 4 chapters? Yeah, 4 chapters. So he covered 4 chapters, is like 1 hour, 1.5 hours. So you can, inshallah, read that. Thank you. So I think it's time for a break. How much time we have for break? 10 minutes. Okay, 40, inshallah.
Just one quick thing. This text that I did not read from Nursi, inshallah, I'll share with Najat Hojam. I would really like you to read it carefully, inshallah, later on.
Why not?
No.
Why not? They have excellent skills.
They have excellent skills.
Seemingly excellent skills. Good skills. No, not at all. Sultana.
But you teach them the morals, right? Which is the
Exactly. If they don't have it, they cannot represent it, and then they cannot give it to someone else. It would be difficult to communicate with them, difficult to work on them with certain projects and so on. And I think some of us experienced that in our lives. We come across certain colleagues who are not as we would like them to be, and sometimes they're just not aware of them. They did not get this at home, and maybe not in education. So this is the importance of having this moral thinking dimension in the 5D steps. So we're not just giving them science or any other kind of science, social sciences, but also we're ensuring that we're building good characters. This is done by the 5th dimension.
So, can you see here is an example of the Prophet ﷺ. We know that he transformed a society. Through him, they accepted Islam. They let go of their bad habits that they were used to for so long ago. And he was the best example as a leader. He was leading them by giving them an example of what a good person should be like. And he was also spiritually and morally guiding them. So it's not just Islam, what to do, what not to do, these kind of guidelines and instructions, but also touching their hearts. And as a result, we've seen this impact on the world. We can see this reflected in the Islamic golden civilization, the pinnacle of that civilization, where the intellectual and social activity was reaching its peak, and so many achievements were accomplished then and now, inshallah. And so this is because he was the best teacher. He was Mahmoud al-Qulub, Murabbi al-Nufus, Mu'allim al-Uqul as well, and Sultan al-Arwah. Why are we having this? Because to be an educator, you need to touch the hearts of the people you are talking to, the students you are talking to, the colleagues you are working with. It's not just about giving them instructions or delivering some kind of information to them. And this is what I experience here in this workshop. Alhamdulillah, we're all brothers and sisters, and we're doing this from our hearts, and inshallah it reaches to your hearts as well, ultimately benefiting the entire ummah. So this is why we have the moral thinking. And now, what is the moral thinking? Some of you had a look at the guideline of teacher's guideline, and you've come across these ideas. So first, the 5Ds model holistic approach extends to not just science, but also developing moral character. We need them with good akhlaq, with students with good akhlaq. So we're helping the parents at home by nurturing these values and virtues in class. We don't want a good student, an A student, but that the student is bullying someone else or being rude to someone. We don't really want that. We don't want that for our students and for our children. And through this, we aim to cultivate individuals who are mindful of their place in the universe and help them become conscious of their relationship with God by seeing good examples in their teacher. They know that this is what they should be like. Like a student who ran to Principal Samah, and he was saying, what should I do? When they decided to give him an R. Through this dimension also, it aims to redefine the traditional concept of good life. Just like what Dr. Tuna was saying, seeing how Korean singers and how their life is, watching certain TV shows, kids, children, teenagers, they kind of have that idea of what life should be like and what is the ultimate goal of life. But we need to reinforce this through education. One, we are teaching them our different subjects. So there are really moral lessons from the universe of the Quran. What we're trying to say is that we are utilizing these two sources, the universe as well as the Quran, in order to extract these moral lessons. So what does that mean? The 5D model, first of all, facilitates extracting these moral lessons from the universe and the Quran. That's number one. Then it recognizes both as divine books, the universe as a whole and every side in it, as well as the Quran, rich in wisdom. It also encourages the development of moral and ethical characters. It's not by saying don't do this, don't do that, don't cheat. It's coming in a holistic, integrative way. And students learn to interpret cosmic verses in the universe, as well as the Quran shapes their understanding of what it means to be a righteous person, what is justice, how to be good, what is humility. And here are examples of the verses and how we can extract moral lessons from them. For example, in the first ayah here, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ. This teaches us, or the lesson we can extract from it is to appreciate order and harmony in creation, and this would lead to maintaining harmony in all aspects of life. Another verse warns against overstepping bounds or causing imbalance. What does this lead to? What can we learn from this? This encourages us to act with moderation and avoid excess in our dealings, in our behaviors, in our interaction. It also tells us that, or instructs us to be just and fair, and basically proper virtues, values, traits that we would like to instill in our students through this model. Now, when we are talking about the moral thinking, as you are writing this dimension when it comes time to do your activity and complete your 5D topic, you have to know, or you have to keep in mind that through this dimension, you are reflecting on the benefits of the observed phenomena, the benefits of the sun, the benefits of photosynthesis, the benefits of habitats, whichever habitat you chose to write about, the benefit of the eye, the benefit of water cycle, and so on. And we have to make the students realize that this gift was custom made for them. Just like we tailor dresses for kids to fit them perfectly, this gift was made in such a way so that it's perfect and it's made specifically for them. Similar to the example of the rose that Dr. Najati was talking about, it was created for your liking, for your nose, for your eyes. Another thing, it encourages readers, students, teachers as well, whoever uses this model, to reflect on God's creation as a unique and precious gift for them. So it's not just there and we take it for granted, but no, it is indeed a gift, and we have to instill that, reinforce all that by exploring this dimension. Then what happens through this dimension is that it is there to guide students or readers on how to derive character lessons. So number one is to know the benefits of the gift, that is custom made for you. It's a precious gift. It's something that we shouldn't take for granted because it couldn't have not been there. The third thing is to derive character lessons from whatever phenomena we are talking about. And then we make them feel, or we invite them to feel sincere appreciation by performing dhikr, fikr, and shukr. And ultimately, it encourages them to show kindness to others. So with this, we reflect that, for example, when it rains, it's with Allah's will. Rain, like the water droplets fall in certain places as those places need this rain. And we can see how these water droplets have been designed by Allah to be kind to all of the living creatures that are in need of this rain. Similarly, students can extract or understand this implicit message of kindness that is within that phenomena, depending on how you structure and how you write, how you present your moral thinking dimension. According to the teacher guidebook, in Islamic tradition, character or akhlaq is the crystallization of ethical virtues and values that guides a person's interactions with themselves, with God, with the society, and with the environment overall. So they develop that sense of compassion to the environment, to the trees, to the leaves, and everything that's surrounding them. So there are 5 main pillars. You want to keep them in mind because they might come up in the assessment. The spiritual pillar, the intellectual.
Hold on. It's in the handbook. It's in the guidebook. No. This is the pillars for akhlaq, or the moral.
The 5 pillars of Islamic character.
Islamic.
You can see that in the title.
Islamic.
I want to take a photo of Islam.
I'm just meeting everyone.
Thank you. So spiritual, intellectual, moral, social, and performance. And we'll see what each of these concepts mean. So by having or fostering a spiritual character, it goes beyond rituals and it includes تحقيق الإيمان, sincerity, ikhlas, God consciousness, taqwa, piety, virtue, and العمل الصالح. For the intellectual character, what does it mean? This is not detached from faith. This includes liberty of faith, critical thinking, seeking wisdom, hikmah, curiosity, wonder, carefulness, thoroughness. So thoroughness, when you ask them to do something, you want them to do it to the best of their abilities and not just do it to get over with the task. This kind of thing. And then moral character is rooted in adl, justice. This encompasses trustworthiness, kindness, compassion, humility, honesty, fairness, and non-greed. And this seems given to an extent, it seems easy to understand, but in some working environments, we see colleagues who are young and also old, they forget about all these virtues. They get so indulged in the work environment, in competition that's not really good, and they forget about all of this. So I always wonder, would they still be acting that way if the Prophet ﷺ was with us? Would they suddenly be aware and that now we have to be better or not? If you would be better if the Prophet was with us, then why not now? You're following the Sunnah by doing that. That is not only about work and accomplishments and achievements, the worthy ones, it's more than that. So it's honestly necessary to reinforce these kind of virtues, although it seems like a given since we're Muslim, we know all of that. Then coming to the social character, this emphasizes social responsibility, forgiveness, ukhuwa, tolerance, respect, caring, rule of law, equality, justice. So how do we interact with each other? How can we be responsible towards each other in our houses, in social gatherings, and so on? Coming to the performance character, this includes applying virtues in practical life, like punctuality, because we respect each other's time and want to be there, hard work, competence, perseverance, patience, and these kind of characters. And so, as you are writing your moral thinking, especially for new learners who did not hear about the 5D thinking before, we start by asking what-if questions, because only then we would engage the students with us. So, if we were talking about the nose, for example, what if the nose was placed on our forehead? You will start laughing, right? You'll start thinking about it. That's not possible. And alhamdulillah, we have it the way we have. And so these are the kind of questions you want to have in the what-if questions. This is because this encourages pondering and purposeful design behind the phenomena that they are talking about, be it nose, eyes, watching cycle, birds, whatever it is. Here is an example. What if we were created to feed on fuel, like cars, instead of food? That's not the case. And then I want to draw their attention to the purpose of reflection. This is to consider the intended beneficial outcomes of each phenomenon. You probably remember the Kahoot, we had this some question. And to recognize how different and less fulfilling life would be without these intentional gifts. So first they ask, and then they reflect on it, and then they understand. This ultimately cultivates a mindful and appreciative, thankful attitude. So by having this as they grow, you would ensure, inshallah, that this would grow into a good man, a good woman, inshallah. And later, after you have completed these parts, you would do fikr, dhikr, and shukr, elements that we have covered enough in these few days. So also in this dimension, you want to consider the connection between the universe and its creator. You want them to see life as an opportunity for constant learning from the science subject or any other field they are studying. They are learning from it, not just for the exam or not just to get the scientific knowledge to be ready for university later. Here the universe is perceived as a school with everything serving as a teaching resource. It's just us, teachers, educators, how we present this to young ones. And now coming to the last part of this presentation, how of the moral thinking. We will upload this on Google Classroom. You are encouraged to watch this video, Extracting Morality or Moral Lessons from Fundamental Physics. That's very interesting. You're highly encouraged to watch that. So what do we do in moral thinking? We redefine what it means to have a good life. We teach them to read moral lessons and extract them from the Quran and the universe. These are the two sources, and I'm emphasizing this for a reason. Recognizing the goodness and blessing. MashaAllah, you're very smart. Cultivating appreciation, ubudiyya as servants of God, humility and justice. And again, I cannot stress enough the humility aspect. So coming to recognizing goodness and blessings, the 5D model introduces students to the concept of God as the inexhaustible source of all good in this life. It helps students perceive countless bounties and blessings. It defines wealth not based on material position. This is your chance, this is your opportunity to open that door that it's not about having material things. Because I'm sure if you take your children, let's keep students aside, that you teach what your children, they want this, they want that and that, and only when they will get these kind of things, they will feel happy. And this never ends. And to us, it applies to us humans as well, grown-ups. So the Tawhidi perception reveals the true wealth given to all human beings, and this generally encourages students to see themselves as the richest individuals. This is where you can instill in them contentment, qana'a, in terms of divine blessings. They have everything. Through this dimension, this also cultivates servitude, virtuous actions, humility, fairness, and justice, as we mentioned. So the 5D model encourages students to identify as abid, as servants. These are the translation terms we use, servants or creations of God. It also aims to shape students into individuals of fadila, virtue. And one of the fundamental goals of the 5D model is to cultivate genuine humility. And we see this in all of you, mashallah. You're all what they call big shots. But mashallah, your akhlaq is amazing. You feel like family. The 5D model advocates fairness and justice, and God's absolute justice leaves no room for transgressions against these values. The model also, the dimension also emphasizes spiritual character and education. This is where we integrate Quran and Hadith as lessons, as you saw in several examples. You've seen the butterfly, we've seen the water cycle, maybe not the coaches, but you have the slides on Google Classroom. You've seen the rock example with Dr. Sabah, and we have the workbooks here. You also have the magazine, issue number 3 outside. It discusses chameleons. And so all of these resources are there to help you in how to write basically a 5D topic covering all the different dimensions. And so through this, when you write the moral dimension, make sure that there is the sense of ikhlas, piety, taqwa, ihsan, tahqiq al-iman, and encourage students to see the world as a manifestation of God's wisdom. And ultimately, one of the goals of this dimension is to develop a personal connection with the Quran. Also, through this dimension, we are promoting communal responsibility and empathy, also reinforcing concepts of charity and kindness as well, tolerance. And this is for the intellectual pillar. You can see this was for social, this was for spiritual. You will need some further insights at your hand. So in the intellectual aspect, we emphasize on the critical thinking, intellectual humility. So whatever they gain in terms of knowledge, they still don't know. We still don't know. No matter how hard we try to know everything, we still cannot. As proof of that, we're all specialized in a few fields, not in all fields. واختلاف أمتي رحمة. It's good that we're different. And coming to the part of developing performance character through education, by having this moral thinking model, the aim is to develop a learning environment that values discipline, intelligence, and resilience. So you want your school or your house your working environment to have all these values. So it's all there in the air. No one is struggling to get these kind of values. And here, before concluding, I just want to give you an example of how to write the moral thinking step because of your assignment. We take the water cycle example. Imagine if your city's water suddenly stopped working. No showers, no clean dishes, no cleaning. Life would become difficult and dirty. Ultimately, we wouldn't be alive. We need water. So what if there was no water cycle? What are the possible scenarios? So as you are writing, think of possible scenarios. What would happen? What is your topic? 5D topic. Did you choose yet? Anyone yet? Fine. What was your answer to the exam? Did you choose a 5D topic?
Yes.
Give me an example.
Example of what?
Any 5D topic.
The elephant.
The elephant.
Yeah.
Okay, what would happen if there were no elephants? Think of the ecosystem. Any animals depend on elephants. What kind of roles elephants play? Why were they created? Why do we need them? Why are they needed in the environment they are in? So these are just the scenarios that we need to think about when having these what-if questions, because we want students to reflect on this phenomena as a blessing. This is a gift. If it was not there, something would happen. This is the purpose of having the what-if questions. Then we reflect on it and we say, elephants or fresh water is a special gift that we should appreciate every day. This has to be written. This is in our mind, it's given, but it has to be written. They have to go back to it and read it to have it in them as they grow up. Water helps us in so many ways. Let's think about the wonderful gift and the creation of water. How do we say thank you to Allah? We say that we can do fikr, dhikr, and shukr. That's the part where you will discuss these three elements. And after fikr, dhikr, shukr, what do we do? It's time for? You have the answer. Character lessons, yes. So what if questions, and then we reflect on them. We do fikr, dhikr, shukr, and finally, we derive character lessons. So an example of water, an example of a character lesson from fresh water. Make your heart clean, just like water leaves dirt behind when it turns into vapor. Work on making your heart clean from sins and bad thoughts and attitudes, becoming better every day. To see more examples of 5D thinking topics to help you, not only for your assessment and for your activities, but if you are planning to apply this model in your schools, please have a look at the versions we have here, at the copies we have here. We have the KG, I think, and grade 1 textbooks. Have a look at them. And also, like I previously said, have a look at the magazines that are already outside. Make use of the presentation slides. And inshallah, this will be good material to help you finalize your activity. It will be material to prepare you for the final exam. And with this, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. I see no questions. Do you have any?
I just when we're talking about the morals of and the values of Islam, I mean, we know that modesty, for example, is the value of Islam. لكل دين لكل دين
Explain in English.
Sorry? Yeah, خلق. لكل دين خلق وخلق الإسلام الحياة. So how is it حياة being reflected in our 5D model? Because that's literally the khuluq of Islam, and because like I'm going through, but I don't see. I mean, humility is kind of somewhat related, but it's not as broad as haya. So is it brought into also the model through the character, or through like I think I can see it go through like every every step in a way. But have you guys thought about this whole?
That's a very good point, actually. ايوه الحديث. شكرا جزيلا للتوضيح. شكرا جزيلا. جزاك الله خير. Sister was mentioning the hadith about the 7 branches of Iman.
Basically, the hadith that talks about 70 branches of Iman, the lowest of which, or one of which is removing something from the road, right? So we're talking about haya, we're talking about all of these things. They are all part of the whole personality, right? So what we expect when we look at those topics is that all those different things are identified from the different realities we are learning from. So we're looking at fly, we're looking at bird, we're looking at the water cycle. So from all of them, we are identifying different traits. There's many traits. There's many things we talk about it. Okay. So the point is that the why did this mic not work? It is on. It is on. I can hear you. It's working. It is on. Now. Okay, I don't even know what I was going to say. What was I saying?
The 7 branches of Iman.
What I'm trying to say is that we were trying to explain how the moral thinking is derived, is extracted. The meaning is extracted from the things that we are studying. So whatever we study, through the contemplation, through the observation, we can make certain inferences and say, okay, so these are the moral guidelines. These are the traits that we can identify, like the teamwork, the patience, what Aisha has highlighted, the spiritual and the intellectual. So they're all in different categories. And then there's professional traits as well. There's professional character attributes like timekeeping. Okay, so the deen is full of guidance, a hadith, and a direction for us. So instead of having a list of those in a separate lesson, we say let's find them from what we are studying. Okay, inshallah, I think that's the main.
I think it would be good to see it in your example, Sister Samah. And I know that in your group you have a topic, you're working on it. So why not attempt to focus on the concept of haya as a virtue that you include and integrate within the model? That would be an excellent example.
Where the part where the what if question. Could I run into the problem that we go down a rabbit hole of what if this happens? So for instance, the example that you gave, what if we our food is fuel? Okay, I could think of if Allah created us to consume fuel instead of food, then Allah will equip us with the systems that can process all that, and like there's a lot of that's going to be built on top of that. How can I prevent the students from not going into that rabbit hole of what if, and then we're getting off topic.
Yes.
One, and we're forgetting what our goal is to showcase the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah himself.
Thank you for raising this point. Remember the point about the analogy where we said that the aim is not to say that Allah's creation is greater than what's man-made, because we know that, we are certain of that. This is not the point we're trying to make. We're trying to have the audience, the readers, see what it takes to make that as compared to that. And now we're having the what if questions just to have them reflect on that. What would happen if this was the case? So we don't want to, let's say, think outside the box in this case, because it would lead to what you are saying. This is just a tool, a way of thinking, of appreciating the gift that we have. And if you have an alternative, do apply it within your group as a 5D topic. Say this is, for example, better than the what if questions. But again, the main purpose, you are the teacher, you are the guidance. So these what if questions are within a certain context. They are to serve a specific purpose. and not to have these kinds of questions. I can imagine them coming up from students, but then you can redirect it to the point you are trying to make.
Because that can happen in any lesson, right?
Yeah.
So the point is that by this time they've discovered Allah, they're loving Allah, they're connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they're going to see the wisdom, the hikmah, in what the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything and see it as perfection, inshallah. Okay, Jazakallah khair to yes,
I remember when presented about the changes, one of the aspects of moral thinking was Quran and Hadith at the end, but yours are like, so is it like compulsory or like what?
We do have it in the slides.
So
we said we connect the Quran and Hadith.
Okay, that's my bad.
You're mistake. إن شاء الله هحاول.
كثير منه. الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول من زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز. كل ما دون الجنة ليس بفوز. قولي هذا اليوم.
So you're able to hear what the brother was trying to say. Anything besides Jannah is
considered a loss.
Is a loss, is neglectable, is irrelevant, is not the real achievement, not the real purpose. So the ultimate goal is Jannah. وكل ما دون ذلك فهو
ليس فوز.
ليس فوز. It's not a win. It's not an achievement. Anything besides Jannah.
فنحن حول ذلك ندور.
That's what we are revolving around.
فلذلك
That's why
يجب أن يبقى قلبك معلق بالله سبحانه وتعالى.
your heart should be connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
فأنت تصلي وتتزوج.
You pray, you marry.
ولك أولاد.
You have children.
على شهادات كبيرة.
You get degrees.
وتنجح في حياتك لكن
you become successful in your life.
الهدف أمامك.
But the goal is in front of you.
الجنة.
الجنة. We should not forget that. شكرا جزيلا لهذه المداخلة. شكرا.
So now, alhamdulillah, we have the sisters from Shakhsiyah school, the Ustaza. One thing I love about their school is that everyone is Ustaza or Ustad. MashaAllah. So, so inshallah, they're going to introduce everything about their school, the background, the work they are doing, their model, and how they are also implementing 5G.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So we are from Islamic Shakhsiyah Foundation, which is in the UK. So I'm going to start off by giving you a brief history of how the school came about. Okay, so our schools are born out of the effort of a group of home-educating Muslim mothers who have been working collaboratively since the late 1990s to fulfill their Islamic duty as a primary educator for their British-born children. Within a few years, this network of home-educating groups had grown to about a dozen. At this point, these groups emerged, and two independent schools with an alternative and Islamic ethos known as Islamic Shakhsiyah schools were established in 2002. The foundation of Islamic Shakhsiyah Foundation is the Hadith degree and the characteristics of education that we find there in terms of Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. From this, we have developed an understanding of what Tarbiyah, Ta'aleem, and Tahdib means in contemporary context. we devised the 7 principles of Shakhsiyya education, which enable us to translate these Islamic educational concepts into practical steps and actions in our schools. We have pioneered the development of the prophetic pedagogy of dialogical halakha to develop the unique Shakhsiyya Islamiyya of each child in our care.
So I'm just going to briefly go over the 7 principles of Shakhsiyya briefly, because we have been working on the 5D thinking. We're one of the schools at 5D course. So just as my colleague introduced the school, our first Shakhsiyya principle is called Niyyah. Okay, so we do try to instill the concept of Niyyah in the children from as soon as they arrive in Shakhsiyya, which is nursery. So we make them understand that our niyyah or intention when we learn is to grow towards Allah, which is the ultimate purpose of the human being. And we've just given examples of the significance of this and the practical application and just a few examples. So with regards to niyyah, it would be cultivate a sense of purpose and meaning in all subjects. And children go on to love learning for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for them to be coming into school every single day, 5 days a week, then they have a meaning as to why they are coming in rather than, just coming in not really understanding. Because sometimes coming in 5 days a week can be quite tedious for somebody as young as 3. And obviously what we do is we develop this concept over, inshallah, right up to year 6. The practical application would be to encourage learners to reflect on the intention all times. And this is where our dialogic pedagogy comes into, because we're constantly in dialogue with our students. And then I'll be just giving a few examples at the bottom. So this is the second principle is, the second principle is personalized character education. So as you know, our school is called Islamic Shakhsiyya Foundation. So that is what we really focus on, the character development of each child. And we work very closely with the families to get a background. We know that each child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created each child with a unique fitrah. So that's what we aim to do through develop personalized character development. And again, the significance would be, so what this does is it instills children with agency and conviction in their iman and with the reflective practice of their deen. So they, inshallah, then go on to choose Islam and implement the teachings in their lives. And the significance would be ongoing Shakhsiyya development at the heart of wider academic and other learning. And again, the practical application would be to have a strong parent-teacher-learner relationship and upholding human-scale personalized education, which means we have a small number within each class, so we don't exceed more than 15 children per class, and that kind of gives us, the time and obviously to understand each child better. The next one is Qudwa, and I think during, over the course of the week, we have been highlighting the importance of leading by example. And so leading by example through engaging professional and personal learning is a constant practice of ilm, ihsan and taqwa, knowledge, excellence, and awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, the significance is a Muslim's duty bound to always keep learning, especially if they are also teaching. So we do have, which is a separate initiative, is IELC courses, and that's basically to educate the teachers or develop their professional development when they're teaching. And we use a concept of 2 learners. And what we say is that the child is the learner and the teacher is the not so young learner. And what that entails is basically that we as teachers are constantly learning about the child as well and how to cater for their needs. And The practical application will be teachers lead by example, and the role model curiosity and intellectual humility by researching and exploring curriculum themes alongside learners. And then we've given examples as well where we do incorporate and improve the parents in the teaching of their children. Halika is the next principle, and we believe in Shakhsiyah Foundation, and the Halika is the backbone of our school. And this principle is based upon the prophetic pedagogy that synthesizes tarbiyah, which is the upbringing, ta'aleem, which is the acquisition of ilm, knowledge, and ta'deeb, which is refinement of character at the heart of the wider holistic curriculum. And again, the significance is adopting a prophetic pedagogy that connects all learning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Learning is rational and reflecting instead of storing facts and information, and that's the concept that we discussed yesterday, that when you're instilling knowledge in the children, it shouldn't just be instructional, it should be transformative, and children should obviously transform themselves. So I'm just going to rush a little bit because I have my colleagues who are going to go on with the 5D thinking. Our next one is, the next principle is Balagha, which is the principle of Quranic Arabic as the language of Islam and as essential to nurturing Shakhsiyah and Muslim culture. And we do believe that the Ummah's decline, one of the factors for the Ummah's decline is due to the detachment of the Muslim, their detachment from the Quran. So this, inshallah, develops a deep connection with the Quranic message and its layers of meaning. And then again, the practical application will be incorporating Quranic concepts in the thematic curriculum and individual lessons. And then the next one is Minhaj al-Shimal, so that's the reimagining curriculum. And it's a principle of holistic, integrated thematic curriculum with the Halika curriculum at its core. And then it just gives you examples with regards to the significance, the practical applications and examples. And Taqdeed is a personalized formative assessment where we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created each child to be unique. So this principle is focusing on the child as a shakhs, as an individual, and so the assessment is formative of the learner's growth towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the significance of this is individualized evaluation of children's unique learning journeys and specific goal setting to ensure they fulfill their unique potential and be as educators support them, inshallah. So I'm just going to call two of my colleagues over to talk about the 5D thinking and how they implement it in their classrooms. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Mustafa Shabana from Islamic Shakhsiyah Foundation. We have actually been one of the pilot schools, as everybody knows, 5 Thinking for Transformation. Our training took place in December 2022. Our teachers were absolutely fascinated when we actually got the training. It was like such a wow factor that we could look at science in this way. We spent a lot of time looking at our science books of how secularism is embedded within simple concepts such as the life cycle of a plant, life cycle of water. I've had a few 5D thinking lessons, and with 5D thinking, our children were able to understand it really well because, as you can see, this picture is in a park, and this is we're actually engaging in the halakha. Our theme was the Gardens to Jannah. So I feel that this model is very important, that you simplify it for yourself, make it as simple as possible, because the more simplified you make it, the better it will be, especially regarding the ages of the children. So if you're like a year 1, year 2, year 3 teacher, you will simplify and it will go become more complex as the years go up. I feel this model is very important to simplify. So our theme was Gardens of Jannah. We had begun to discuss mosque and what does the garden mean to us. The headings were put up. The headings were put up on the board. Plants can be, so we were talking about plants. So plants can be found in different sizes, shapes and colors. Why do we need plants? So as you can see, the children started engaging straight away. You know, they were giving me answers of why we need plants. Many plants are used for food. Some plants are used to make clothes. Animals are able to make their homes in trees and bushes. And at this point, you would show a video to explore it further. Okay. And the fun facts. So I actually had strawberries in the class. It totally depends on the age of the children. So I had strawberries in class. I showed them to the children. And then we had some fun facts about strawberries. Strawberries are teeth whiteners. They contain vitamin C, which helps fight plaque. Strawberries are only fruit. Are the only fruit with seeds on the outside. Unlike some fruits, strawberries don't continue to ripen once picked. There are about 200 seeds in every strawberry. 8 strawberries a day will give you vitamin C, which is vitamin C as much as an orange. That's 140% of your daily recommended amount, just 8 strawberries. So this was like a wow factor, fun factor for the children. And then we compared. So at this stage, I had a real plant and I had a fake plant. And the comparison, here you can see the children began to compare it themselves. Plastic plants are found in supermarkets. They don't need watering or sunlight. They can make pollution. Many materials are used to manufacture, i.e. glass, plastic, clay, or even paper. So at this point again, you show a video. With regards to this, we showed a factory manufacturing fake plants. So then I had this activity, because it has to be hands-on, depending on your children. And if I had those books, I think the planning would be even better, but they came a bit late. So basically, I had cutting of paper in front of the children, and I said, now, can this all come together by itself? So this is where I start instigating critical thinking. So now already they're engaged, and they think, actually, I can't do this. This can't happen. So they were already engaged. I mean, they're engaged from the start, but it's the way you portray the lesson that pushes them to start thinking. At this stage, they were like, we can't do that. So I asked the question, if you woke up in the morning and saw a huge factory of flowers, would you say it happened by itself? So you're like trying to negate chance, causation, you're just trying to bring it all together. And then real plants grow everywhere. They do not pollute, they do not waste. Do seed, soil, and water create them? So again, you're instigating the thinking within them. Do they have a mind? Because at this stage, you say, Allah made them, or, because it depends on the child. Are they more powerful and intelligent than humans? Plants could not be the work of the seed, soil, or water. So now the children have started to connect. Real plants multiply. Then why can't scientists make fake plants multiply? It's not easy to produce plants, and already we've gone through a whole process. But before I carry on, I would just like to emphasize that this took me 4 weeks. It wasn't a one-day lesson, and in no way can it be a one-day lesson, especially if the children are younger. So let's think, does the soil, water and seed know that they must make a plant with roots? Does the sun know that it needs to provide energy? So no. As they have no power to do this, the maker of plants has designed plants to act as if they made their own food. So now you're saying that, the plants are doing something, but there's a greater being behind it. And this is where we started speaking about the names of Allah. And this is actually the work of the children, because we had been talking about the names of Allah already. So they knew some names. So they could bring some names together. So Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, who gave us air, food, and oxygen through plants. And then we came to the names of so to appreciate. But before that, the names of Allah brought it all together. You know, like the children actually appreciated Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and probably for the first time understood the connection and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think as human beings, we find that anyway, that when we use the name of Allah with His creation, you know, we know Him more. So at this point, it's appreciate, and some of these children it's so difficult to get work out of them. And it's very, very difficult. My colleagues will tell you how difficult it is. But then, you know, to say be thankful to Allah because plants are a big gift was like, had me all thinking this child could actually write that. And then appreciate no oxygen, no air, no medicine. So he's got X's everywhere. X books, no perfume, no food, no perfume, oxygen. So they've actually thought about everything and brought it all together. And this is a lot of this thinking. I've guided it, but they've actually come along themselves. And it's actually amazing how this works. And then appreciating it after that, bringing character building. What did we start thinking about? So what is it about plants that, you know, we can compare to human beings? So there's so many different plants that was created, you know, beautiful colors. Human beings are different. You know, we all have different traits, different personalities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this world as an amana. We need to look after it. So there's a lot of thought then involved in this. And I, for one, absolutely love this, and it brings a fun into teaching because you believe in it, and it brings a fun into science. And this is some of the work that my children produced. So it looks like something like this at the end of it. You know, like they mention the names of Allah, they've compared, they've explored, they've connected, they've appreciated, they basically did it all. And, you know, there were different posters. This is what I had. I didn't realize we had to do a presentation, so. But alhamdulillah, yeah. So I think this method is amazing. It really works. And I really wish that I had had those books. For my, yeah. Sorry?
My name is Arman. I also work with the Islamic Shakhsiyya Foundation, and this is a lesson that we planned for the higher grades. And this topic was very difficult because it was a part of the chapter of evolution. And evolution always has people getting into a lot of different kinds of debates. So this is one part of the chapter, variation. So we started off with the introduction, that why do we see variation in offsprings and in over the generations, million years we've seen generation. How do we link that back to why is there change in the creation? So living things are designed to give birth to offsprings of same kinds, but normally offsprings may vary or not identical to their parents. So they might have different characteristics, appearances, size, and behavior. But it is very important for us to understand the variation because it helps us understand the diversity in creation. So then we looked at ourselves. And then we understood that we also have some inherited traits from our parents, 50% of the DNA from our moms and 50% from the dads. So when we were discussing this fact, some of my students, they were shocked, they were amazed, and they thought that, teacher, what if someone's, like before the child is born, one of the parents have passed away, will they still get those traits? So it was very hard for me to tackle those kind of questions, but then it really, you have to be prepared for all sorts of questions when dealing with closer to teens. And then the example that I took was variation in the beaks of the words, because this was again linked to the evolution theory, that Darwin's theory of the beaks of the birds and the finches. So we see a lot of different kinds of birds, and the theory says that all of the birds were, everyone came from one organism, and then they evolved, and then the beaks changed according to the environment. And then the theory says that the variation is very important for survival. Like, variation is why survival happens, is what the theory in other terms says. But when we look at the beaks, we see that there's so many different kinds of birds. We have a generalistic bird, we have birds that eat grains, we have the birds that, the beaks that are used as a fishing net, the beaks that are used for cracking nuts. So each bird, when you look at it, the beak is amazing. It's fascinating when you look at the actual bird. I've done a course in ornithology, that is bird watching. And then when you actually look at that, it is amazing. And then I compared that to the tools. Okay? And then when we compare that to the tools, we see the different the skills that are required to design the tools. That is the design of the material, the preparation, and then its formation, the heat treatment, the assembly, finishing, and the quality control. The first point, the only thing that I'd like to emphasize is that the design of the tool, considering its intended use and functionality. So you first have the function in mind, and then you design the tool. You don't make the tool and then say, oh, this looks like it's perfect for cutting wires, so maybe this should be used for that. So when we use that, then why do we use the same thought process for when we look at the beaks of the birds? So the question is, did the environment factors determine the shape of the beaks? Did the beaks get reshaped as a result of the activities such as pecking or fishing? Can the designs of the beaks for specific purpose be a result of random luck? And then we connected that each beak has its own design, its own purpose. It was connected to the different food webs, so it had a specific diet and then unique structure. Similarly, in human beings, we can see the genes. We have different fingerprints. We have patterns on the tongues, and there's stripes on tigers and zebras. Then we related that to the names of Allah, that He is Al-Khaliq, but the most favorite one here is Al-Musabbir, because I hadn't understood the name of Allah, Al-Musabbir, as I understood it now. It's the flawless shaper. And then we appreciate with the ayah that sometimes we do not need to understand the purpose of the creation. If Allah wants, Allah can create out of anything, out of nothing, out of something. Allah only has to say be, and it is. So we recognize and appreciate the uniqueness that is created and the responsibilities that each one has. And then I had the activity where I asked each student to think of something that is unique about them. And then we had it stuck on the walls, and then we connected that back to the names of Allah.